Welcome.
So, Sam's introduced me, so I'm going to ask Greg if you could please introduce yourself to the audience, but also, can you tell us what's the most exciting thing about your role currently?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Greg Endean from Beeswax. I'm Commercial Director. I've been with the company for over 4 years. Beeswax is a demand-side platform, for those that don't know, so I'm speaking pretty heavily from a programmatic angle today. The most exciting thing, I think, is that I feel like we've been pretty close to data automation and certainly building kind of native AI tools for the last 6 years as a business, but it feels like now is a really, thanks to the huge AI tech that the public is now massively aware about, I'm going to try and not say it. It's really brought our services into the spotlight and meant that we can start to talk about some things that people finally have some real context on. So that's, it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. So automation has been on a journey, and it's been on a journey for us in the industry. As you say, consumers are now joining us on that journey. Mm-hmm. How have you seen automation evolve? And if we think about AI and bringing AI into it, so how is automation evolving, and what has the impact of AI been on that evolvement?
Yeah, so obviously programmatic by its nature, right, is effectively is automated marketing or the buying and trading of ads. So it's kind of inherently automatic.
Yeah.
But by default became also relatively complex and confusing for people that weren't connected to the industry 5 days a week. And so I think what's helped is there's been quite a lot of workflow automation and workflow-based tools that have helped. Everything has become a lot more API-driven. So that's certainly helped drive automation. And then the next step of that is there are some products and services available that have made the automation and API-based connections available really user-friendly and kind of tangible, so that anyone with a basic level of technical understanding can start to make the most of these complex processes and procedures. And then if I think about it from an artificial intelligence machine learning point of view, the obvious one is optimization and algorithmic optimization, but it does kind of trigger a point that was mentioned earlier around black box and programmatic having a bit of a...
It's had that reputation, hasn't it?
A reputation of being a black box, but certainly the last 3 years or so, it's moved to a much more open, accessible ecosystem that is based on transparent customization and that side kind of thing. I think I'd also say that there are some specific tools that may or may not be of value to you, but if you don't know these things I'm about to say, remember them, do some research on them, because whether they impact you or anyone else in your business is certainly going to be relevant. So if you're not familiar with the terms bid shading and ghost bidding, specifically do some bid shading I think is a bit more known, but ghost bidding is slightly less so. If you take those away and do some research on that, I think you'll find that there's some really powerful AI-based tools that are super user-friendly and that exist today.
If we reference the panel earlier where we're talking about MMM, it was a lot of talk about data and the use of data and big data. So, and also the impact that data has on machine learning and AI. So for the advertisers in the room, marketers, the agencies, what do advertisers need to know about data and their use of data?
I think that obviously Gordon was talking quite heavily about data on the last point, but I think that if I think about it from a programmatic perspective, certainly the buy side, the industry as a whole has attempted to move to being much more open and accessible from a data perspective. So obviously a big part of my job is having commercial conversations with brands and understanding the needs and requirements, and it's a very long scoping process. It's very in-depth, and it often requires sharing some knowledge and kind of base level understanding of what it is that you do today, where do you want to move to in the future, and what problems could technology like Beeswax solve. And nearly always the answer is log level data, or comes down to something surrounding log level data, whether it's attribution use case, measurement, a brand safety use case, or a CPA optimization based use case. Everything connects into the ability to have log level access to data points, specifically programmatic data points. The problem that then kicks up is, well, how do we use this stuff, right? What do we do?
Yeah,
we don't
got it all. How do you
right?
put it
It's great, you know. We've got this super fast car, but we can't drive, right? So we also then look at tools like Snowflake, and there are some things which are really designed to make to offer very, very low code options to start building models, to start querying huge chunks of data, like hundreds and hundreds of gigs of data on a daily basis, and really simplifying that bridge between what would traditionally be a data science and engineering job can now be done by a marketeer at their desk with some very baseline query knowledge, SQL knowledge, that type of stuff, if you have access to the right tools.
And that comes nicely onto a point about how we've just touched on it, and the fact that marketing was and has been traditionally quite siloed.
Yeah.
So you've got marketing teams, you've got data teams, you know, product teams, everyone kind of doing their own bit and not necessarily joining the dots. But how can data teams and marketing teams work better together? And are we seeing, with the emergence of AI and those type of tools internally, are we seeing an impact on culture, most teams coming closer together, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think and that's going to continue to be the case. Obviously, you see D2C brands having a lot more of a kind of leg up, essentially, because of the nature of the business, the way they're structured, the way the teams are put together, the bridges are far shorter. But I do think that brands are going to have to continue to put themselves very close to data teams, very close to product and engineering teams. That said, there are also a couple of things around AI that are interesting, so we can tie the title of the panel back into this. There's two types, and I'm sure people have mentioned this before, generative and predictive. Generative is the thing that gets the headlines because it's super snazzy. You can put some prompts in and it will spit out exactly what you need, and it's super intelligent and fast and quick. But then there is the predictive stuff, which has been around forever. And the predictive stuff is based on machine learning tools that need to receive some sort of information, need to receive some kind of data. And the job really now is to close the gap between what you require as a marketer from a brand perspective. And think about campaign efficiency and performance for a second, right? What information is critical to start to build a model that can automatically increase efficiency and performance of your programmatic campaigns? It's not a lot. Right, like the first iteration of models that the most advanced users of Beeswax start with is like a 10-line CSV. That's like the first version of the model, right? You pass that into the system, you iterate, you test and learn, and you figure out what's working, and then you use the access to log-level data to increase the efficiencies of those things on a super simple basis, right? And I think what you're gonna need to start thinking about, if you're not already, is how do you close that gap between what's happening in product, what's happening in data and engineering in the businesses, and what you're doing as marketers, and not only close the gap, but increase the intensity of that relationship so that you can directly connect a lot quicker on a more regular basis. I also want to mention a couple of other things which I think might be useful. Yeah, it'd be good to, where do people start? So, you know, maybe talk about a couple of tools or a couple of... Yeah, so I would, right, and I've done this, right, so speaking from personal experience, if you haven't worked with Zapier or IFTTT, you should start to think about using those two products. They're free, you can use a Gmail to log into them, there's trial solutions, and what they are effectively is not so much AI, but they are heavy automation tools that have made API endpoints from a bunch of technologies super user-friendly, and at the click of a button you can connect one platform to another and create the variables and parameters for that partnership, that connection, and you can change how you want it to work in between. You can add as many layers to it as you need. You can add as many iterations, and as you can make it process as many times as you want. Those types of things from a workflow automation or a creative optimization type standpoint are super critical. And if you don't have access to those tools, or if you're not using those tools officially, then personally fire them up on the weekend and see what you can do, because the options are they're amazing. It simplifies life. We use them in the across the commercial team at Beeswax. We've used them for a long time to help speed up workflows. We've used them for lead generation. We've used them for passing data from A to B and not relying on engineering, because everything has an API for the most part. A lot of the partners and vendors that you're working with have APIs. And those tools allow you to work with those APIs with a zero code understanding of how you need to get that done.
So I can do it, perfect.
My mum and dad can do it. I've made them. So.
Question, build or collaborate when it comes to tech? Because, I'm not going to go down talk about in-housing specifically, but just what would you recommend, or what are you seeing customers doing?
Yeah, it's a good one. And my answer is always, it depends. And in most cases, it's both. So let the companies that make a living off building product build product, but work with the companies that encourage you to do the finish, to add the finishing piece to the puzzle.
So still have that input, still,
Absolutely, right? So the whole point, if I use Beeswax, because why not, as an example, is there are other DSPs which do similar things, right? But what the ambition of Beeswax is to say, well, look, we can also give you the tools to buy the media, but we want to leave a huge space for you to be able to customize what happens with the tools.
Yeah, so a decision then should be down to individual brands and customization.
Exactly,
to business's need.
And so we have spent a bunch of time and energy developing an API, which is so becoming an API first DSP for the most part, so that you almost don't need to log in and interact with the platform, right? If it's purely programmatic workflow optimization that you're interested in, great, figure that point out. If it's data access and speed of processing that you want to do, great, there's an API that you can figure out for that as well. Or if it's iterating a bid model, right, then amazing, use an API, figure out how that works, and start to completely customize the tools, so that it isn't just a case of, well, I've also got access to the same technology that all of my competitors have got as well.
Yeah, so the technology needs to be able to work for that individual business and customization.
Yeah, exactly, but they should take the legwork out of the maintenance, right? Because it's super heavy. It's like, I used an analogy the other day. I said it's like, if you have a website or any kind of thing like that, it's like shared hosting versus private hosting. Private hosting requires you to have like system admins and super technical knowledge of how to stand up a server and continue to run it. Whereas now there are like AWS or GCP options where you can just say, spin up the server and maintain it for me for a low cost. And those, I think, just have that approach if you can across other areas of marketing would be really useful.
We've got a couple of minutes left in case there's a question in the room. If not, is there? No, I'll continue with my question then. So, lastly, do you think that all, we talked about automation, we talked about mixed model marketing and panel before, we talked about data. Do you think, or do you see that all digital channels are being impacted by, the automation, the involvement equally, or is it still kind of siloed to certain areas?
Yeah, I think inherently some are going to lend themselves to become more open. And as I mentioned earlier, programmatic has definitely gone on that journey of being like, just give us money, we'll give you results, to now like, well, actually, I want to lift the lid and be able to say, well, I don't need that, I don't want to pay for that, and I just want to take these sections and apply them to what I'm doing as a business, right?
But even if we look at how programmatic's evolved, it started in certain channels and it's literally expanded across media mix.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some, as I say, that will lend themselves to being more open, to passing data, and for you to apply some kind of custom, I say model, and that's kind of a scary word. It really isn't, right? Some kind of custom feedback loop that allows you to very slowly iterate towards a direction of where you think you want to head with your performance and your marketing. So some channels, it's just not possible. I think obviously social is a big one where it's going to be more difficult. Anything that involves a walled garden, to use that term, is going to be challenging to extract the right level of data out of. But I'm hoping everything will start to move in that direction. Certainly as things like AI take more of a hold, and the requirement for these tools becomes a bit more, has more momentum behind it.
And it's about bringing us closer to the consumer, isn't it? As brands, it's about better understanding of the consumer, and these tools can enable us to do that. So.
Yeah, and just being able to achieve a lot, and I referenced D2C brands, but being able to achieve a lot with limited resource, that's what these tools allow you to do.
Yeah.
And you should absolutely maximise it if you can.
Definitely. We've bang on time.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Cheers.
Cheers.